Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Met the Golden King. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. God damn it, screamed the voice of one Naruto Uzumaki as he began punching a wall in rage, his face a deep crimson while crimson droplets formed around his knuckles, and deepening cracks forming the wall his fist kept on hitting. The reason for the blonde's rage? Well, one Haruka Umino had failed him. Again, for the third time in a row. Once again denying the boy a chance of being a genin.se. For the past 3 years, Naruto had toiled and endured. He studied as hard as he could to get his grades up. He trained and trained to get stronger and fast. And he tried his best to master chakra control exercises. But still, that damn clone jutsu just kept on effing things up for him. And that damn Haruka wouldn't do a single thing about it. Every time he asked what he was doing wrong, the scarred Chunin would shrug his shoulders and say, just keep on training, you'll get the hang of it eventually. That bastard. He knows what's wrong. I know he does. He's just holding me back. He's trying to ruin my chances. The other villagers, all they do is glare at me or whisper crap behind my back. Some stores treat me unfairly too. But of all the people I hate right now, I hate that goddamn Haruka the most. Naruto ranted angrily as he punched the wall once more, creating an intricate web of cracks, some of them filled with blood. And that's your answer. Punching holes in walls, spoke an unknown male voice, prompting the blonde to turn around and see a man wearing armor that seemed to be made out of solid gold. The very air surrounding him filled with pride and arrogance, very similar to that of a certain self-proclaimed avenger. Who the heck are you supposed to be? The blonde asked with a raised eyebrow, his question earning a large and bulging tick mark on the stranger's forehead, until the man took a deep breath and gave a cocky smirk before answering. Well, I suppose I shouldn't blame you for not knowing me, given the state of this backwater country. How about this? I was born part god, and dubbed the King of Heroes. I collected and claimed treasures from all over the globe. I had a ferocious battle that lasted for days on end with an entity that became my best friend. I spurned the affections of a goddess who then sought to punish me. Who am I? The stranger asked, almost as if he were playing a game with the boy. The whiskered teen had heard that story once before, and then the name quickly came to him after remembering the reference of those hints the man dropped. Gilgamesh. You claim to be Gilgamesh? The whiskered teen asked as he nursed his injured hand. I don't claim to be. I am the one, the only, Gilgamesh, the King of Heroes. I didn't expect to meet one so strong in my bloodline, but here you are. The king spoke with a grin, his arms crossed over the plate of his armor. Your bloodline? Naruto asked, feeling suspicious of this newcomer. Over the years, Naruto had quickly learned that blind trust was a good way to get yourself killed in the realm of shinobi. So it was always a good idea to take things with a pinch of salt. And this guy may have had a few screws loose. I am your ancestor from the distant past. I suppose that makes you part god just as well. Gilgamesh answered, prompting the blonde boy to raise an eyebrow. But before the whiskered teen could ask further, he was interrupted by the form of Mizuki approaching from almost out of nowhere. A silver-haired Chunin gave a fake smile though for some reason. He didn't even look in the direction of the man wearing golden armor, much less even acknowledge his presence. Naruto glanced to the side a bit towards the man claiming to be his ancestor. Gilgamesh smirked and then tapped the side of his head, likely hinting that he was inside the boy's mind and thus could only be seen or heard by him. Sorry if I snuck up on you, Naruto-kun. Got a minute to talk? Mizuki asked, prompting a reluctant and slow nod from the boy. I am sorry that Haruka had to fail you again. He's in a tough position and he can't go around passing kids that aren't ready to be ninjas, you know what I mean. He just wants what is best for you. Mizuki spoke, trying to sound sympathetic to the boy, though Naruto couldn't help but scoff. If that were the case, then maybe Haruka could help me figure out what I was doing wrong with the clone jutsu. The whiskered teen harshly pointed out, earning a small chuckle from his ancestor. Mizuki's smile faltered for a bit, but perked back up as he regained his composure. I guess you aren't wrong about that. But anyways, I'm here to give you an alternative exam to become a genin. It's simple. All you need to do is sneak into the Hokage's office, steal an item called the Forbidden Scroll, learn a jutsu from it, and you pass. Easy, right? The drop-off point is in a clearing next to an old shed. Mizuki explained and handed a small map over to the boy with the needed directions, though this immediately made the blonde boy glare at the Chunin in suspicion. If there really was an alternative exam, why offer it to him only now? And if something were stored inside the Hokage's office, then it must be of importance. It was obvious that the Chunin was up to no good, and if the boy did something stupid, there would be consequences. Play along for now, came the voice of Gilgamesh with a knowing smile. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this piece of advice, and then like a light bulb blinking on, he got an idea on how to play this to his advantage. Putting on his most excited grin, the whiskered teen shouted gleefully, that's awesome. You just wait, Mizuki-sensei. I'm gonna pass this exam in no time flat. At this statement, the silver-haired Chunin smiled, believing that he had just played the boy. But all along he was the one getting played. After their exchange, Naruto dashed off to the Hokage office, the form of Gilgamesh floating behind him. Nicely played. And if you're thinking what I am thinking, then things are going to go well for you. The Golden King spoke as his form followed closely, his descendant not bothering to answer him in case that Mizuki may have been following him around as well. But that wouldn't be a problem once he was inside the Hokage Tower. Forgot to mention something. I can only maintain the connection between us for a bit longer, and it is rather fortunate that Little Weasel brought up the Forbidden Scroll. Before we were interrupted, I was going to tell you about a certain object that could help you. The Deck of Heroes. It's sealed away inside of that scroll he was talking about. The king spoke lazily with a shrug, though the mentioning of that object earned his descendants' interest. What's this about a Deck of Heroes? Naruto asked quietly, double-checking over his shoulder to make sure his invisible and self-proclaimed ancestor was the only one following him. Well, it is a deck of cards that one can use to summon all manner of heroes, better known as servants, to aid you, including myself. 300 of them total. You could say it is, in many ways, similar to your ninja summoning contracts. One slight problem, and this is why I decided to speak to you. Of the 300 hero cards, one is missing, Gilgamesh explained, his voice becoming increasingly bitter and angry. Which one? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow, prompting the Golden King to answer my own. At some point of time, my card was stolen and sealed away. I want you to find it for me. The whiskered teen thought for a moment, wondering what Gilgamesh would have to gain from his card being returned to the Deck of Heroes, but his thoughts were cut short as the king's form seemed to be fading and glitching out. Damn, thought I had a while longer. I won't be able to hold the connection for much longer, so you better get a move on, brat. Gilgamesh warned his descendant, prompting the whiskered teen to nod as he hurried into the Hokage Tower, quickly marching up to the office door and harshly banged on it with his fist. A quick shout of enter was heard, allowing Naruto entry inside. When the boy entered inside, he found the Sandaime sitting behind his desk and smoking from his favorite pipe, apparently taking a short break from the paperwork. Naruto-kun, for a moment I thought you may have been Kazashi. I heard that you failed the academy exam again. I'm truly sorry, Naruto-kun. Hiruzen spoke in a sympathetic tone, and unlike most people, his was actually genuine. For years the Sandaime Hokage had been akin to a grandfather figure to the boy, and was one of the few he actually trusted. Yeah, about that. Mizuki-sensei offered me an alternative test to pass and become a genin. Naruto spoke, deciding to play dumb and tip off the Hokage to the Chunin's plot. While Naruto was indeed smarter than people believed, he had to damn well make sure that they didn't view him as a potential threat. Hence why he often pretended to be a retarded ramen addict that constantly screamed Hokage of believe it. Though sometimes he wondered if he played the dumbass card a little too well at times. The Hokage gained a confused expression as he asked what alternative test. Such a thing would have to be approved by me first before being implemented. What exactly did Mizuki tell you? He asked at the end, wanting to be absolutely certain on what the boy was told. Well, he said that I had to steal something called the Forbidden Scroll and learn a jutsu from it. Naruto answered bluntly, which caused the Hokage to suck in too much from his pipe and started coughing violently, smoke escaping from his mouth all the while. After recovering from his coughing fit, the Sandaime finally spoke up. Naruto-kun, the Forbidden Scroll is an object with many dangerous jutsu techniques, some of them being personally invented by the Hokage themselves. It is an extremely important treasure of Konoha. I can only guess that Mizuki is planning to steal it and use you as a convenient scapegoat. You were wise to tell me about this. When he had finished speaking, he noticed that Naruto already had the Forbidden Scroll strapped to his back, making the Sandaime look towards the office safe and find it wide open. What are you doing? Didn't you hear what I just said? Hiruzen asked, wondering how the boy popped open the safe without him noticing. And how did the boy know the combination anyway? Stealing the scroll. Mizuki expects me to be dumb enough to bring it to him, right? The blonde boy stated as if it were the most simple thing in the world. In the background, the Invisible King couldn't help but chuckle in amusement, until his form began glitching again, making him growl in annoyance. For a moment, the Sandaime seemed like a deer stuck in the headlights before it finally clicked in his mind what the boy was planning out. I see. A sting operation then. Very clever of you, but I will need to make arrangements to ensure. The Hokage tried to speak but was cut off by the boy. No time. The longer we wait, the more suspicious Mizuki will get that something's up. Then we might lose our chance to catch him red-handed. The blonde boy stated impatiently and then grabbed some blank papers and a pen off of the desk. From behind him, Gilgamesh smirked and asked what color are his hands now, the joke earning a stifled laugh from his descendant. Naruto, Mizuki is a Chunin. You won't be able to beat him on your own. Hiruzen tried to argue, but the boy had already run out the door. The Sandaime cursed himself since the boy was as reckless as his own mother Kushina and was likely going to bite off more than he could chew. With a growl, the Hokage grabbed his telephone and dialed a number into it. After waiting a few moments, someone on the other end picked up, prompting the aged Sandaime to speak. Get me Nico. I don't care if she's off duty, she's the only one I can trust with this. It's an emergency. Minutes later. Fast moves, Brett. You were in a pretty big hurry to get out of there, Gilgamesh noted since his fellow blonde left the Hokage's office in a rush. All the while, the whiskered teen was furiously scribbling down any jutsu he came across on the papers he had retrieved earlier. If I didn't, then the old man would have gone into grandpa mode and kept me under lock and key. And right now, I am literally holding a potential gold mine. No way am I going to miss a chance like this. Now where's this deck you told me about? Naruto asked, noticing that his ancestor's form was glitching again. And the spasms seemed to be coming faster too. It seemed he didn't have that much longer. All the way at the end. Gold lettering. Can't miss it. I'm curious though. You have copied down numerous jutsu from that scroll and you're about to get a veritable army of servants. What are you going to do with all that power? Conquer this village. Establish an empire. Take revenge on all who have wronged you. You are my descendant after all. Your potential's limitless. Gilgamesh questioned, a cocky smirk forming on his face. Haven't decided just yet. Revenge seems likely, though it wouldn't be fair to punish the whole of the village for the actions of a few. After that, maybe I'll have figured something out. Till then, I'll keep my options open. The blonde boy spoke in a dismissive tone and then at last found the entry he sought, finding that the so-called deck of heroes within a seal, finding some kind of message there. Only the blood of the heroes can awaken this mighty army. Naruto asked as he read the entry over. Then it clicked in his mind why he was supposed to get the deck and nobody else. It seemed that only an individual bearing the blood of one of the heroes within could undo the seal. But still, there were so many questions he needed answered. Like, why was it so important to Gilgamesh that his card be returned to the deck? What did he have to gain in all of this? Before Naruto could question his ancestor, he noticed that the Golden King's legs were disappearing from under him, flecks of golden light flowing into the wind before flickering out of existence. Time's up, mongrel. Undo the scroll. Now, I'll tell you how to make the contract. The blonde king instructed, and not seeing any other option, Naruto obeyed. He bit his thumb hard enough to draw blood and rub some of it onto the seal, and in a puff of smoke, a small black leather case with a golden clasp appeared. Open it. Make a cut on your hand to draw even more blood and bleed onto the cards. Then channel your energy into it to seal the contract. The blood will ensure the servants acknowledge you as their master and to ensure no one else may touch the cards without your permission. Gilgamesh instructed, his form fading more as his left arm glitched before vanishing as well. Naruto nodded as he pulled the clasp off, exposing the deck of cards within. He pulled one of his kunai from his ninja tool pouch and sliced open the palm of his hand, his face cringing in pain as he placed his injured hand onto the cards and his blood flowed down into them. Golden light shined brightly around the boy and then he channeled his chakra causing the light to fade and a pentagram seal formed on the deck, signaling that the contract was now complete. As the boy turned to his ancestor, he found that only the disembodied head and a lone arm was all that remained of Gilgamesh. Well done. I look forward to seeing what you make of yourself. Don't forget to find my card. Now, one last thing. I give to you the Gate of Babylon. Make use of my treasures, and be grateful that I'm sharing some of my power with you. The Golden King spoke, and his lone arm held out an open palm towards the boy. For a moment, Naruto felt a rush of power flow through him before it faded, and at last the form of Gilgamesh vanished entirely from his sight. Naruto was now all alone, just him, that deck of cards, and the forbidden scroll. Turning his attention to the deck of heroes now in his possession, he picked it up and drew the card on the top deck. Lancer, Artoria Pendragon, was the name of the card he had drawn, and for some reason he could sense a powerful entity within, along with strong feelings of loyalty, chivalry, and shame. Deciding to give it a try, he held the card into the air and poured his chakra into it. Bright and dazzling light filled the clearing as a woman in silver armor and a blue dress appeared, carrying a spear. For a moment, she seemed confused by her new surroundings. She then turned towards the blonde boy and stared at him for a brief moment. She then bowed to one knee, a hand over her chest as she spoke, "Greetings to you, Master. I am Lancer. Has the Holy Grail War begun?" For a moment, Naruto was confused by her question and answered her, "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. And as far as I know, I've heard nothing of a Holy Grail War. I am the descendant of Gilgamesh and came into possession of the deck of heroes." At the end of his explanation he presented the aforementioned deck, causing Lancer's eyes to light up in recognition. "Refer to me simply as Lancer for the time being. And that is a powerful item you carry. Take care not to lose it. Now then, is there a particular purpose for which you have summoned me?" she asked him as the whiskered team began to gather up the forbidden scroll and the jutsu he had copied down. "Truth be told, you were the first card, servant I drew and I decided to give it a test run. Seems easy enough. But since you asked, I may indeed need your help. See this big scroll I'm carrying? It's a treasure of the village we are in, Konoha, and a man called Mizuki intends to steal it," he explained, giving her a simplified version of the situation. "I see. So we are to catch a thief then?" Artoria asked, readying her lance and gave a sweeping motion, as if to prepare herself for any potential threats they may encounter. Which was a good thing too, since the sounds of bushes rustling could be heard, signaling that something was on the way here at this very moment. "An enemy?" Lancer asked as she pointed her spear in the direction of the noise, her body poised to strike in case it was the thief that her master had mentioned. From the bushes emerged the form of a man with a scar across the bridge of his nose, and he seemed to be absolutely furious for some reason. "Halt! Identify yourself," she shouted at the man, though he seemed to ignore her in favor of staring angrily at her new master. Turning to the blonde boy, she asked him, "Is this man friend or foe?" "That's debatable," was Naruto's cryptic reply as he found it odd that the Chunin came looking for him. Was he working with Mizuki? "Naruto, are you out of your mind? Why the hell would you steal the forbidden scroll?" Uruka demanded, his face a bright crimson color due to his apparent outrage, though his statement only made the boy more curious as to his presence. "Funny you should ask. How did you know the scroll was stolen and how I am the supposed thief? Naruto asked with a blank stare, his fingers tapping against the side of the scroll while Artoria slowly stepped between the two, keeping her master behind her to keep him safe from this man. Mizuki sounded the alarm. You're lucky that I'm the first chunin that found you. You have a lot to answer for this time. This is too far for one of your pranks. Haruka shouted angrily and prepared to storm up to the boy, only to find the tip of Lancer's spear pointed at his neck. Not one step further. Master, is he the enemy? Artoria questioned the whiskered teen who seemed to have a thoughtful expression on his face as though he were thinking on how to best answer her question. The chunin finally seemed to take notice of the blonde woman standing in front of him and tried to push the tip of her spear away from his neck, only for her to press the blade directly against the flesh of his neck, drawing a tiny bit of blood as a warning to him. Naruto, who the heck is this woman? Tell her to back off, the chunin demanded, with sweat dripping down his face from fear since the woman had an almost soul-piercing glare directed at him. Before Naruto could even give his answer, the sound of metal cutting through the air was heard, and a giant shuriken cut through Aruka's side. The scarred man let out a soundless cry as he fell to the ground. Clutching at his injury while standing atop of a tree limb was Mizuki himself. So, you revealed your true colors then, Mizuki? Naruto asked with a small growl, nodding to Lancer, who understood that the enemy had arrived and had just made his presence known. The silver-haired chunin sneered slightly since things hadn't gone according to his plan. But at least the forbidden scroll was still within reach. Gotta hand it to you, I suppose you aren't the dumbass everyone thought you were. When you left with the forbidden scroll, I found it odd that an alarm wasn't sounded. So I decided to improvise a bit and alert everyone myself. Mizuki spoke, giving a slow and mocking clap of his hands. The jig's up. I told the Sandaime about your fake test. He knows you're a crook. Naruto spoke triumphantly, which earned a deep scowl from the silver-haired man. So that's why. Whatever. Doesn't matter. So long as I get the scroll to Orochimaru, it'll be fine. The chunin spoke to himself as he unclasped another of the giant shuriken on his back, preparing to throw it at the boy. However, Artoria appeared in front of the chunin and raised her lance, preparing to cleave the silver-haired man in two. With a panicked yelp, he leapt off the branch to avoid her attack, but the spear still tore through his chunin vest. A splash of blood came as the blade carved into his flesh. I don't understand what's happening here, but I will not allow a thief to do as he wishes, much less bring harm to my new master. The blonde woman spoke, glaring at the silver-haired man as he clutched at his wound. He growled angrily, not expecting for this strange woman to be here, and from what he could tell she was very powerful. He coughed a bit, causing blood to spill from his mouth, making him think that he must have suffered some fairly fatal damage. Mizuki knew he could have handled his now ex-partner Haruka. The man had spent so much time teaching snot-nosed children that he had grown as soft as a marshmallow. Naruto, he was hoping, would have used a powerful jutsu from the scroll and ended up killing himself, but he could still handle the brat. But this woman he wasn't expecting. I was hoping to save this for later, but I guess I don't have much choice at the moment. The silver-haired man spoke as he pulled out a bottle of some blackish-purple liquid. After popping the cork, he quickly drank back some of its contents before Artoria used her lance to smack the bottle out of his hand. But it was too late as Mizuki's body began to change, gaining a more muscular and animalistic form. Stay back, master. I sense a foul energy coming from him. Artoria warned her master, making him nod in understanding as he took a step back. The whiskered teen wished he had taken a moment to learn at least one of the jutsu he had copied down, but for now, he'd have to place his trust into the King of Knights. So this is the power Orochimaru gave me. Exquisite, Mizuki muttered as he cracked his knuckles, a savage grin on his face as he picked up a pair of giant shuriken in his hands, his bulky beastman form almost towering over Lancer's. That stance potion may have made you stronger, but it did not improve your skills. Typical of cowards and bullies to rely on fake power. The King of Knights spoke, clearly not intimidated in the slightest. Mizuki bellowed and charged at her in a blur of motion, but she anticipated his reckless charge and pivoted to the side. Her lance seemed to almost dance in her hands as the blade scored a large slice in Mizuki's abdomen, followed by a cut on his back. With a war cry, Mizuki began to wildly swing his arms about, trying to rip the servant apart with the giant shuriken in his hands. Watch out, he's a chunin for a reason. Haruka wheezed out as he clutched at his side, watching this fight. If it could be called that, since Lancer seemed to be doing perfectly fine as she danced around or batted away each and every blow from Mizuki. You sure about that? Naruto asked in an unimpressed voice, with Artoria sharing his feelings since the silver-haired man was already running out of breath. Naruto wasn't sure if it was because Mizuki's skills had declined from working as an academy teacher, or that strange drug had messed with his ability to think properly, but either way, it was kind of pathetic how he was swinging his arms around like a primate instead of fighting like a trained ninja. After a few more moments, Mizuki was now riddled with cuts and slash marks as blood flowed down his body. Artoria couldn't help but give him a look of pity as she spoke. You have lost. Surrender now and your life may be spared. There is no point in continuing. Before the rogue chunin could even speak, he collapsed to the ground as steam left his body, his muscular form shrinking down into a scrawny husk as his body atrophied at an astonishing rate. Wow, now that has got to be one of the most pathetic sights I have ever seen. Naruto commented in a mocking tone, staring down at the form of the now broken form of Mizuki. From the looks of his body, it seemed that breathing alone was painful for him. Shut up, brat. You don't have the right to judge me. You effing nine-tailed fox. You killed so many people all those years ago. Mizuki groaned out, trying to act defiantly by attempting to reveal the truth of the Kyuubi attack to the boy, only for the whiskered teen to scoff. Yeah, whatever. I stopped caring ages ago. I already know the story. Yondan couldn't kill the beast, so he sealed it inside of an infant, me. A lot of people died during the Kyuubi attack, and so everyone hates me for containing it. Big whoop. Naruto spoke in a dismissive tone of voice. Lancer raised an eyebrow at this news, but she said nothing since she didn't fully understand her master's situation. Regardless of the case, she could sense that he wasn't a bad person, and if he wished to tell her about all of this, then that was his choice. Regardless, he was still her master, and it was her duty to serve. You know, Mizuki coughed as the light began to leave his eyes. Yeah, I was born October 10th. I have whisker-like birth markings. People call me things like Demon Brat when they think I'm out of earshot. Doesn't take much to put two and two together. Though if I were a retard, that may be different. Naruto spoke with a shrug, and then he noticed that Mizuki had stopped breathing entirely. Hard to say if it was from his injuries, or the effects of that potion, or maybe both. But it didn't matter since the man was now dead. Nice job, and thanks for the help. Naruto spoke to his new servant, who only gave a brief nod. Thanks and praise are not necessary. I was merely doing my job in protecting you, she replied bluntly. The two blondes then heard more groaning and looked in the direction of Iruka Yamino, who had now propped himself against a tree, trying to put pressure on his wound. Naruto-kun, please, I need help. I need a medic, Iruka pleaded as the whiskered teen and his servant approached. The Jinchuriki glaring down at his longtime academy teacher, making the man perplexed by the boy's behavior. What are you waiting for? Go, get help. The Chunin spoke almost pleadingly, wondering why his student hadn't rushed off to find much-needed aid. Not so fast there. I'm actually curious about something. You, like many other adults of this village, were perfectly aware of my status as the Kyuubi container. Is that why you wanted to ruin my chances of being a ninja? Naruto asked and gestured for the servant to back away. Artoria nodded, since she could see that this was likely a personal matter for her master, and that this was up to him to deal with, so she wouldn't interfere for now. Why, you're crazy. I never wanted to. The Chunin tried to speak, but the whiskered teen kicked him where he was injured, earning a cry of pain from the scarred Chunin. 3 years. For 3 effing years, I have been stuck in your class. And in all that time, not once did you ever help me. Did I ask for special treatment? No. All I asked you was what I was doing wrong with the clone jutsu. And not once in all my time there did you help me figure out what I was doing wrong with that one jutsu. No, you didn't. So tell me to my face. Why? Naruto demanded, and once again kicked at Iruka's injury. The Chunin teacher coughed blood and finally answered, fine. You want to know why? Because the Kyuubi killed my parents. So what? The Kyuubi killed a lot of people that night. Men, women, children, sisters, mothers, brothers, fathers, cousins, drinking buddies, sect friends, and so on. What happened, happened. I was just a baby. That had nothing to do with me. Were your parents ninjas? I protecting the village and you. That's terrible, but they knew the risks and did their jobs. And if they were civilians, then they died in a tragedy same as anyone else. At least you had them to lose though. At least you had a chance to make some happy memories with them. I never even got that much with my own parents. And people like you and Sasuke that don't appreciate their blessings really piss me off. Who effing who? Why? My parents were killed in the Kyuubi attack, so I'll take revenge on its prison who so happens to be in my class. God, you're such a effing baby. Did it make you feel good, seeing my face of disappointment with each failure? To see me struggle in school? Was your petty revenge worth it? Naruto demanded as he very tore into Iruka. His ranting even made Artoria cringe a bit. Meanwhile, the Chunin was at a loss for words as his mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, unable to come up with a response of any kind. Finally, the Chunin glared back at the boy and asked, don't you care about the people that died that night? About the people in this village? About their pain? No, I don't. I stopped caring. Groaning and griping over dead people won't bring them back, and dwelling on the deaths of people from an unexpected tragedy only brings more pain. There's only a few people I care for, and they all have one thing in common. They don't judge me for my burden. People like you do. And I am not going to be a goddamn retarded doormat. The blonde spoke and raised his leg up to kick at the Chunin once more, only for a calming hand to be placed on the boy's shoulder. That's enough of that. He's not worth it, spoke a gentle voice from behind him, prompting Lancer to ready her spear once more, but then quickly lowered it when she sensed that this newcomer wasn't a threat. It was a woman in a cat mask with purple hair that Naruto seemed to immediately recognize. Nico-san. Naruto spoke and then hugged the masked woman's body, who quickly returned the embrace and patted him on the head. Sorry for being late. I was busy elsewhere. Personal matters. It seems as though everything is now under control. To a degree. Nico spoke softly, gesturing towards Iruka's bleeding form and Mizuki's shriveled up corpse. The purple-haired woman also looked at the woman in silver armor, her blue dress fluttering slightly in the wind before returning her attention to the blonde boy. That was reckless of you to run from the Hokage's office like that. Though, in the end, you served your village well. Return the scroll to Sandame-sama and report what happened to him. I'll clean up this mess. She spoke while gently rubbing his cheeks. Nodding in agreement, the boy gestured for Lancer to follow him as they made their way to the Hokage Tower. Haruka's body had lost a lot of its color due to blood loss. Finally, any more and that brat may have killed me. The Chunin managed to speak out before coughing a bit. He waited for the Ambu woman to apply first aid, but her gaze seemed fixated on the retreating forms of the two blondes. You wouldn't have been a satisfying kill for him, Nico muttered as sat down on the ground in a cross-legged position and stared at the Chunin through her mask. Her behavior confusing him since she wasn't trying to apply any medical treatment to stop the bleeding. What is the holdup? I am literally bleeding to death. Right here, in front of you, Haruka exclaimed, his vision blurring and starting to dim. The Nico Ambu didn't even deem it necessary to give a response as the Chunin finally passed out and was soon to expire. With the Chunin knocking on death's door, she pulled out a pen and notepad and began scribbling down a report, detailing that at the crime scene, Haruka Umino was DOA from injuries sustained by his ex-partner Mizuki. There, one less problem for Naruto-kun in the future, she muttered before snapping her notebook shut. She would need to call a cleanup crew to dispose of the bodies since it wouldn't be good if this incident made the newspapers, both for the sake of village security and the safety of Naruto Uzumaki. Meanwhile, Hokage office. And that's what happened. Naruto spoke, who had explained what had happened earlier, only leaving out the parts about Gilgamesh and about copying down other jutsu. He had explained his finding of the deck of heroes and summoning Lancer to aid him against Mizuki. For the most part, the blonde knight remained silent, only giving brief yes or no answers to some of the Hokage's questions. The boy then finished with his telling of interrogating Haruka and Nico's appearance just minutes earlier. I see. It utterly sickens me that Haruka would sabotage you through apathy and negligence for the sake of petty revenge. If he survives his injuries, I'll be sure to have his head banned. Now, was there anything else? Did Mizuki mention who he might have been working for? The Sandame spoke while taking a drag from his favorite pipe. Yeah, he mentioned Orochimaru, Anko-chan's former sensei and your ex-student, right? The whiskered teen asked more in the form of a statement, earning a nod from the Sandame. Hers, and then glanced over to the blonde woman accompanying the boy, her face a blank mask that was difficult to read. From her posture and body language, she was definitely a skilled warrior akin to that of a samurai, though for some reason, he felt that she also had the disposition of a king. Call it an educated guess from someone who also ruled over others. Hers and returned his attention to Naruto and replied to him correct. Orochimaru has caused the suffering of many people over the years. Now then, Naruto-kun, in recognition of your service to Konoha and for usage of a summoning technique, I hereby award you a shinobi headband and dub you a genin of Konoha. Arrangements for a rank reward will be made and I'll see about getting you a Jonin sensei for apprenticeship. Apprenticeship? You mean I won't be put on a team? The Jinchuriki asked out of curiosity. He had heard of Jonins taking on single students as apprentices, which was sought after by many genin hopefuls, but if this was the case, then things may be easier in the long run for him. Indeed, when Uruka failed you, the student roster was imbalanced by one, so I needed to find another genin without a team to fill in. A strange boy called Sai is on Team 7, which would have been your team. Anyway, I think you will develop better with one-on-one training with a Jonin sensei than in an entire team. Hiruzen explained, though he left out the part that Team 7 also comprised of Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno, with their Jonin sensei being Kakashi. While Kakashi was a competent Jonin, his teaching skills are questionable. Not to mention his personal connection to his late teammate Abido could cloud his judgment in regards to Sasuke. And on top of that, putting Naruto and Sasuke together on the same team would likely be a recipe for disaster. Appreciated, old man. The blonde boy replied with a cheeky grin, his hands now clasped behind his head. From the background, the form of Artoria could feel her master's happiness through their bond, warmth filling her chest, which brought a thin smile to her face. Come back tomorrow morning at 10 for your reward and your headband. I need to make some phone calls to find you a suitable sensei. The Hokage instructed, earning a nod of understanding from the boy as he exited the office, his servant Lancer following close behind. As the two walked back towards his apartment, Lancer finally spoke up. Master, you haven't asked me to go back into card form. She noted, since it would have been a simple matter. Of course she could do it herself at any time, but she didn't feel it appropriate to change back without his say-so. The whiskered teen raised an eyebrow and asked her, I guess I haven't. Why, do you want to go back to being a card again? At his question, the blonde Lancer's face scrunched up in confusion, since he had asked her what she wanted, as if he actually cared about her thoughts on the matter. No, I don't, she replied with a somewhat downcast expression, currently unsure of what to make of her new master. He was so young, and there was so much that she didn't fully understand about him. But from what she could tell, he was connected to a certain incident involving a demon or a beast, and he was the creature's walking prison. And in doing so, he must have suffered immensely from a burden that was forced upon him. If she had pieced together everything correctly, then you don't have to. He spoke as if it were the most simple thing in the world. Your name is Artoria Pendragon. Pendragon being the name of the legendary King Arthur from the story of Camelot. You a relative of his or something? The boy asked out of curiosity since he recognized her surname from when he had looked at her card. Don't speak a servant's name so carelessly. We servants go by our class names to protect our true identities. If our identities were to be discovered, then one could discern our histories and legends for weaknesses. A key example being Achilles for his heel. And to answer your question, I and King Arthur are one and the same. She answered him while giving a brief warning about the names of servants. Her statement earning a confused look from the Jinchuriki as he looked her over. But you're a woman, Naruto stated as he glanced at her bust for a brief moment. I pretended to be a man while I was king and was dubbed as King Arthur. She answered him bluntly. So, wait, your wife Guinevere cheated on you with Lancelot because you were a woman? Naruto asked, recounting some of the infamous tale that led to Camelot's downfall. That's not inaccurate, Artoria replied with a faint blush of shame on her face, remembering that she had caused her wife a fair amount of pain back in the day when she served as a king. And since she was also a woman, she couldn't perform in the same manner as a male, and Lancelot could fill that void. So how the F did you procreate with Morgan Le Fay then? The whiskered teen demanded to know, since the legendary King Arthur actually being a female kind of screwed up that plot point. Producing an heir of my bloodline was obviously a challenge given my true form, so Merlin changed me into a pseudo-male for a time so that I may sire a child. Morgan took advantage of this and stole my seed, thus creating Mordred, Lancer clarified, though she now wished that she hadn't made those mistakes so long ago. Before the boy could question her further, he cringed as he felt a searing heat in his pocket that almost threatened to burn his flesh. He pulled out the deck from his pocket and found a singular card glowing a deep red. He pulled out the card and inspected it, and found it to be labeled Saber. Mordred. From within the card, he could sense complex feelings of love, respect, and admiration, but above all a deep and unsettling hatred. Naruto then wondered what happened if he summoned Mordred. Would they fight? Would they try to destroy one another? Would they even listen to his commands if they were put together? Gulping nervously, he pocketed the deck again before Lancer took notice. Master, forgive my curiosity, but is this place not for harlots and thieves? Artoria asked, realizing that they were now in the red light district, and off to the side were some women dressed in flashy or revealing clothes, which was further evidence of their location. Yeah, the red light district. My apartment's not too much farther, Naruto answered her, chuckling a bit as Artoria kept glaring suspiciously at any male passerbys that look in her direction. Will your parents not question my presence on our arrival? Lancer asked as she sneered at a drunken man who walked by, her spear gripped tightly in her hands as though she were expecting someone to try something stupid in this area. Don't have any. I'm an orphan, was all her master said, making his servant remember when he had interrogated that rather pathetic-looking man from earlier. I never even got that much with my own parents, were his exact words. Is that why you want me to stay by your side? Are you lonely? She asked him as they approached a building with lots of graffiti painted on it with numerous obscenities that can't be repeated in polite conversation, some of them even making the King of Nights gape in horror. Her question caused her master to tense up before drooping his shoulders. He didn't even look in her direction as he replied, would you be offended if I said yes? He fiddled with his apartment door for a few moments and then opened it with a click, inviting her inside. She stepped inside of his home and found it to be relatively clean and well cared for despite the hideous outside of the building. Do you not have friends or other family? Artoria asked as she took a seat on the nearby couch and looked to her master, who was busy putting on at least half a dozen locks on the door. No family, not many friends. The few friends I have do what they can, but they can't hang around 24/7, was his answer as he sighed and took a seat next to her, the former king now sensing deep sadness and loneliness that was almost unfathomable. I see. I believe I have pieced together most of your story. The people of this village, were they cruel to you? Did they try to hurt you? Lancer asked as she hesitantly reached out and kissed his cheek gently to try and comfort him. Hurt me? No, at least, not in the physical sense. Everyone would glare at me, whisper behind my back, or just stay away from me like I had the plague. Parents would tell their kids to stay away from me, and shops would sometimes treat me poorly or kick me out entirely. But, out of everyone in this village, Haruka was likely one of the people who tried the hardest to ruin me. By doing nothing, Naruto replied somberly, giving a deep sigh. That is over now. That Haruka person lost a lot of blood, so his survival is very much in doubt, assuming he hasn't already expired. And your village leader acknowledged your efforts. I do not fully understand this village, but you are my master and I am your servant, and I will endeavor to serve you faithfully and dutifully. If you wish me to remain in this form for the sake of companionship, I shall do so, she promised him, giving a soft smile. I appreciate that, Artoria. We might be master and servant, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends. I look forward to working with you, he replied back and then wrapped his arms around her in a hug. She tensed up for a moment, unused to such contact, but nonetheless returned it with a small smile. She then looked down and noticed the deck of heroes poking out from his back pocket, the card of Mordred sticking out slightly, the face of her bastard child almost glaring at her in hatred and jealousy. While it is possible for a servant to will themselves back into card form, they require their master's consent and energy to achieve human form to begin with. So long as Mordred remained within her card, then she wasn't a true threat. But if her master cannot control such an unstable personality, then as both a knight and his servant it'd be her responsibility to protect him from danger. As for Naruto, he couldn't help but smile now that he had this power. He still needed to learn about this Gates of Babylon that Gilgamesh gave him, but that could be saved for later. For the time being, he was content to have found a new friend in Lancer, and perhaps hoped to gain other friends amongst the many servants within his deck. And tomorrow, well, that would mark the beginning of a new dawn for him, as a shinobi and as a descendant of the King of Heroes. In Chapter 1, Amake, The Many Deaths of Emiyashiru. In a certain shop owned an uninteresting and unimportant fellow named Emiyashiru, it is now closing time. The orange-haired man was locking the doors and about to turn off the lights as he remembered something. Oh, right, the cheese, he muttered to himself, looking towards a pot of hot and melted cheese used for nachos and some other snacks. He walked towards the pot and then unexpectedly slipped on a small puddle, causing him to flail about wildly as he tried to regain his balance. However, his arms knocked the pot off balance and he fell to the floor, his body sprawled out, his face paling as he noticed a large pot was tipping over to his direction. The golden and cheesy contents spilled out and fell directly into his face with the rest splashing onto his body. OOOHGOOOD. It's sticking. Why is it so hot? He screamed and wailed, voice muffled by a thick coating of cheese that made its way into his mouth as he screamed, the melted cheese now filling his orifice and scorching the insides of his throat until he began to choke on it. Finally, he passed away, dead on the floor. Eventually, Emiyashiru will revive as though nothing had happened, and he will be forced to endure another bizarre or gruesome death. Why? For sits and giggles. Master, it is time for you to awaken, spoke the soft voice of Artoria, making her blonde master stir awake. His eyes fluttered open as he found his face pressed against the Lancer's generous bust, his arms wrapped around her waist while his body was cuddled up next to her. Naruto slowly looked up towards her face and found it to be but a few inches from his own. By the looks of things, he must have fallen asleep right here on the couch and ended up using Artoria as a living pillow. He wanted to apologize since he felt like he might have taken advantage of her to some degree, but his mouth could only open and close since his voice seemed to be stuck in his throat. Sensing his thoughts, Artoria spoke, "Fear not, master. If you wish to use my body for comfort, I will not protest. Besides, as you can see, I have done nothing to separate myself from you. You looked too comfortable and I did not wish to wake you as you slept. Until now, that is." She then pointed at the clock, showing that it would soon be time for the boy to meet with the Sandaime Hokage. Her words actually bringing some relief to the boy. "Oh, right, I guess that's true. But, if I ever end up making you feel uncomfortable, you can tell me." Naruto spoke with a sheepish smile as he released her from his grip, rubbing the back of his head in some embarrassment. "Noted, though I must admit, I too was rather comfy in that position," she replied in a soft voice. Her master could only nod in understanding as he went to the bathroom to splash his face with some water and change into some fresh clothes. Another set of that awful orange jumpsuit. Master, not to question your tastes, but ninjas, to the best of my knowledge, are meant to strike from the shadows. Yes, to act as spies or assassins. Flashy colors like that wouldn't be the most suitable choice in your line of work. Artoria spoke, trying not to sound mean or insulting to him. But that jumpsuit alone was threatening to melt her eyes. "Yeah, I see what you mean. But I can't really afford much else. The jumpsuits come cheap and I only have so much money for my stipend," the boy explained with a small groan, but then he perked up, remembering that he was supposed to receive a rank reward which was actually rather considerable, so then maybe he could get better clothes. "I see. That should be easily rectified later. Shall we go, master?" Artoria asked, readying her spear. Her young master nodding in agreement as the two departed towards the Hokage's office. Though Naruto was kind of nervous and couldn't help but wonder who his sensei would be. "Hokage office, I see. And we still know almost nothing about this organization, Akatsuki?" asked the form of Hiruzen as he had received the needed report from Jiraiya. As it turns out, the information was quite minimal to say the least. The Toad-san couldn't help but sigh as he rubbed the back of his head. "Yup, seems like they have a particular interest in the Jinchuriki and seem to work in pairs. Orochimaru was a member at some point of time, but left them, likely to pursue his own twisted agenda. The only other two I managed to confirm the identities of are Itachi Uchiha and Kasama Hoshigaki, who seem to be partners. Nasty pairing," the Toad-san muttered in disdain, with his sensei nodding grimly in agreement. Itachi Uchiha was an almost world-renowned prodigy and one of the most powerful Sharingan users on record. And Kasama Hoshigaki is a known member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, and earned the nickname as the Biju without a tail due to his seemingly inexhaustible chakra reserves, which are further bolstered by his weapon, the Simhata. Missing Ninja, all in the S-rank category. If the members are this powerful, it chills me to wonder how strong the leader must be. Hiruzen muttered in thought, wondering what kind of a monster Akatsuki's leader must be. "That's a good question. I'll keep looking into it. Someone has to know something," Jiraiya replied as he proceeded to leave the office, but was stopped when his old teacher cleared his throat, gaining the Sanin's attention once more. When the Toad Summoner turned around, he couldn't help but gulp when he noticed his sensei was glaring hard at him with cold eyes that seemed to be as sharp as a flint. "Jiraiya, I understand you have a spy network to run. But since you're here and in the village, can you at least stick around long enough to introduce yourself to Naruto?" The boy should be here any minute now. I think he would at least like to meet his godfather. The Hokage spoke as he drummed his fingers on the desk in irritation, especially since it appeared as though the Toad Sage deliberately went out of his way to stay out of Naruto's life. Hey, I'll see him next time I'm in Konoha. Jiraiya replied in a dismissive tone and tried to exit the office, only for a kunai to empt itself into the doorframe with a thud, making him gulp nervously as he turned around, seeing that the Hokage's stare had hardened further. Kushina was right about you. Minato made the worst choice imaginable, was all the Hokage said in a chilling tone down the Sannin's spine. Jiraiya's eyebrows knit together as he glared back at his sensei. Now why would you go and say that? The Toad Summoner asked, earning, are you serious? Kind of look from the Hokage. From the time Naruto was but an infant, you have constantly used your spy network as an excuse to stay away from the boy. I decided to be a little lenient with you since traveling around the nations would not have been an ideal childhood for the boy, but I suppose once again I have been too soft on my students. You could at the very least write to the boy, or pay an occasional visit to let him know he has some form of family around, yet you won't even do that much for him. The Sandaime replied in a scathing tone. Fine then. If you really don't wish to see young Naruto, then get out of my office. And don't you ever come near him with the whole concerned godfather act. And if you even begin spouting that child of prophecy trash, then I will have you trialed, court-martialed, executed, and then I'll have your ashes flushed down the toilet. Now get out of my office. The Sandaime spoke, making a solid promise with the full authority as the Hokage. With an angry scoff, the Toad Summoner opened the door to leave and put some distance between himself and the Hokage, only to find the form of Naruto with his loosely clenched fist raised up as if he were preparing to knock on the door until it was abruptly opened. Jiraiya almost did a double take on who was standing in front of him, but then glared harshly and shoved the boy aside as he stomped away. Stop right there. You should apologize, yelled a female voice belonging to Artoria as she pointed her spear at the retreating man. Let it go. It's not worth the hassle, the whiskered teen instructed her, making his servant sigh with dissatisfaction while reluctantly lowering her spear. However, she would be sure to remember the man's appearance if they ever encountered him again. Naruto stepped inside the office with the Lancer servant following close behind him. The whiskered teen then asked with a small frown, the hell was that about, old man? That weird guy didn't look too happy about something. Personal business. Nothing for you to worry about. And for your own good, I suggest you stay away from that man. He's completely untrustworthy. The Sandaime spoke in a grim tone, making the boy nod in understanding. And from the looks of things, it wouldn't be a good idea to ask too many questions. The Sandaime quickly reached into his desk and pulled out a shinobi headband and a small scroll before handing them over to the Jinchuriki. By the power vested in me as Hokage, I am proud to name you as a genin of Konoha. The payment for your service in apprehending Mizuki has already been added into your account by me, personally. And now for your sensei. Enter, the Hokage commanded, and in a puff of smoke, a certain purple-haired Anbu appeared. She removed her cat mask revealing her face and spoke to the boy Anbu, codenamed Nico. Aka, Yugao Yazuki reporting for duty. I look forward to training you, Naruto-kun. The Anbu woman spoke with a kind smile before placing her mask back over her face. Artoria was glad to see a somewhat familiar person. Despite only having met this Nico for a few brief moments, it seemed she cared for Naruto's well-being, and she also seemed to be a trustworthy sort. Nice. I think I'll enjoy learning from you. By the by, what happened to that prick Iruka? Naruto asked out of some curiosity, wondering if his neglectful teacher had croaked. Iruka lost too much blood and died. He won't be anyone's problem anymore, was Yugao's blunt reply, while her new student could only nod as he began to tie his headband around his right arm. From behind her mask, her eyes scanned Naruto's clothes up and down and then clicked her tongue in annoyance. Before we start training, we really must get you some new clothing. I refuse to acknowledge you as a ninja until you can dress the part. She spoke, earning a sheepish grin from the boy. Yeah, I see your point. Well, I don't think that any shops will try cheating me with you and Lancer-san hanging around, he replied while scratching the side of his cheek. To be honest, he didn't really mind the color orange, but it wasn't an ideal color for a ninja. Sometimes he wondered that the stores deliberately sold him such bright colors to make him stand out more, thus put an even bigger target on his back. Very well then, we shall make a brief shopping trip. In fact, I think I know a good place. The Perplet spoke and gestured for the two blondes to follow her. As they left, the Sandaime narrowed his eyes, knowing that his student Jiraiya would soon become a problem. He'd need to get a handle on him, and soon. Fortunately, he knew someone that could keep the man in check. Later, well, what do you think? Naruto asked as he gestured to the new outfit, which consisted of a dark blue trench coat with an armor mesh shirt beneath and a pair of jeans, along with the usual shinobi sandals. The two women looking at the new clothes with some approval in their eyes. A definite improvement over that awful orange, Yugao commented, with Artoria nodding since she liked the color blue just as well. Thanks, I kinda wanted the yellow one, but that seemed kinda gaudy, not to mention would stand out just as much if not more than my orange jumpsuit, he commented as he grabbed several extra sets of his new clothes and proceeded to the counter, only to turn to Artoria and take note that she didn't have any clothes of her own. You want some clothes too? He asked, taking the gentlemanly route of offering to buy her something else to wear. "That won't be necessary, I assure you," she replied, and then her armored dress transformed into a simple white blouse with a long blue skirt, before changing back again into her armor. The sudden change impressing both student and teacher. Seeing that it wasn't an issue, Naruto prepared to pay for his new clothes. All the while, the cashier kept glancing in the direction of the Anbu, who had a hand on her sword in a not-so-subtle manner, serving as a warning that the cashier won't be allowed to mistreat the boy. After purchasing his new clothes, Yugao nodded in satisfaction and spoke good. "We shall now commence our training in the Forest of Death." The Nico-masked woman spoke, earning a loud cheer from Naruto, although Artoria had a skeptical look on her face. "What's this about a Forest of Death?" the King of Camelot asked with a raised eyebrow, finding the name a tad ridiculous. At her question, both Yugao and Naruto couldn't help but giggle quietly to themselves as the servant narrowed her eyes a bit. Without a word further, Nico gestured for the two blondes to follow. As they progressed towards their destination, Naruto was casually flipping through the numerous cards from the deck of heroes, looking for any other probable companions he may wish to summon. A number of them caught his attention: Sir Francis Drake, Medusa, Jean d'Arc, Minamoto no Reiko, Jack the Ripper, and Tamamo. And from each of these cards, he could sense numerous emotions, many of which he couldn't put a name to. But still, he was very much looking forward to summoning them at some point or other. But for now, all he needed was Artoria. As they walked, they encountered an unwelcome sight in the form of one Sasuke Uchiha who was sporting his trademark scowl. "Walk faster," Naruto almost pleaded, earning a nod from his new sensei since she didn't wish to interact with the self-proclaimed Avenger either. But it was too late since Sasuke had already taken notice of the trio and spoke up. "Hey Dobe, where you going?" The whiskered teen didn't even bother to suppress a groan of annoyance as he retorted, "What's it to you? I don't see how it is any of your business." The response earned an annoyed HN from the Uchiha, while Naruto couldn't help but wonder why the thrice-damned prodigy was even bothering him. Oh wait, he was probably going to lord his success over his favorite punching bag from the academy since he'd passed, unaware that Naruto didn't receive his own headband until later. "Couldn't help but notice you're wearing a headband while being escorted by an Anbu. You steal that and get caught. Impersonating a ninja can be a pretty serious offense." The Uchiha spoke, almost laughing at his own joke as he gestured to his own headband, unaware that the whiskered teen was the one going to get the last laugh here. "Wrong. This Anbu is my sensei. I received an apprenticeship after aiding in a certain incident," the whiskered teen replied, not even trying to hide his amusement as the Uchiha could only blink dumbly. The purple-haired woman nodded, backing up the boy's claim, which made the Uchiha's eyes widen even further, his confusion changing to outrage. "An apprenticeship? Why the hell is a loser like you getting private training from an Anbu and I'm stuck on a team with some weird pale kid and a useless girl?" Sasuke demanded angrily. "I don't have to answer you. Come on ladies. It's pointless trying to talk to this guy." Naruto spoke bitterly as he grabbed Artoria by the arm and started to almost drag her away while Yugao followed suit, very eager to get as far as possible from the Uchiha. What was his problem? And why did I feel like strangling myself after feeling that sickeningly edgy and superior than you aura from that boy? The King of Camelot asked, feeling a very strong urge to bathe herself. "Several times. I'll explain later. Don't spend too much time around him or you might dumb down. Like, attack the 5-cage type of dumb," the whiskered teen explained briefly, causing a small sweat drop to form on the Lancer's head. "I don't know what that means exactly, but I'll assume that it is bad," Artoria muttered, only now noticing that her wrist was in the grip of her master. For some reason, the contact earned a small blush from her as womanly feelings bubbled up from her heart. Even to this day, romance and love were foreign concepts to her, due to her extreme dedication and obsession with being the perfect king. From the blonde's other hand, which was still holding the deck of heroes, the card of Mordred burned intensely, the heat almost scorching his hand, and nearly made him drop the cards before releasing Artoria's wrist to stop himself from dropping the deck. In the background, the Uchiha took note that the Dobe of the academy was holding onto those cards pretty tightly for some reason. "Oi, Dobe, what's so special about those cards you're holding?" the Uchiha demanded as he rushed forward to see them up close, only to be stopped when Artoria pointed the tip of her spear at his throat. "Come no closer than that. I shall not have you tame my master with your foul presence. Even breathing the same air as you makes me feel ill," she spoke, causing the Uchiha to narrow his eyes when she called the Dobe master. With a growl of envy and frustration, the Uchiha turned on his heel and muttered angrily, "I'll be back to settle this. You're all lucky that I need to show up for some stupid test for my team." With that said, he marched off with his hands stuck in his pockets, grumbling to himself about what the Dobe could be hiding. Who was that boy? He had a foul air about him, Artoria muttered as she lowered her spear a bit, though her eyes warily watched the Uchiha till he was finally out of sight. When she was sure he was gone, she finally gave a sigh of relief. Naruto scratched his cheek as they continued on to the Forest of Death. The blonde boy answered his servant Sasuke Uchiha. "My school bully who liked to use me as a punching bag during class spars. I guess old Iruka always paired me with him cause he knew I can't beat the bastard in a straight-up fight." Anyways, a few years back Sasuke's entire clan was wiped out overnight by his elder brother Itachi. Men, women, children, all gone just like that. Sasuke swore revenge and has been obsessed over it ever since. So much so that he single-mindedly seeks power to surpass his brother, without care of consequence, and acts like an a-hole to everyone around him. and if he doesn't get his way, then he throws a tantrum like a spoiled brat. After his explanation, the Lancer servant HM'd slightly in thought. I see. I can understand a desire for vengeance, but to act in such a manner is a disgrace to himself and his clan. And I am curious for the reason this Itachi murdered his clan and family, yet permitted his younger brother to live. Artoria wondered aloud. She then noticed that they were approaching a forest filled with trees that could easily tower over her castle back in the old kingdom of Camelot. So this is the forest of death you spoke of. Impressive. What manner of beasts live in these woods? Artoria asked almost excitedly, feeling a sudden motivation to train alongside her master in unknown territory. Correct. Expect to meet gigantic beasts, man-eating insects, poisonous plants, and well, let me sum it up and say that everything in there that isn't you will try to kill or eat you. Yugao explained with a grin behind her mask, which widened further upon seeing the servant's disbelieving expression. And as if on cue, a loud groan coming from a bear was heard as it came walking out of the bushes to scratch its back against a tree. The large animal the size of a large shed. Oh well, look, a bear cub. Yugao spoke sweetly, making Artoria's eyes widen at the mentioning of cub. And then a second bear the size of a 3-story building came out with a lazy yawn as it watched over its cub, not even giving the humans and servant a sideways glance since it didn't view them as a threat. The King of Night blinked a few times and couldn't help but chuckle nervously. This would definitely make for an interesting place to hone her skills alongside her master. Deciding not to disturb the bears, the trio skirted around them and headed deeper into the forest until they found themselves in a clearing that seemed to be free of predators. For the moment, all right then, we may begin training. Naruto-kun, I think you'll be needing this. The Ambu spoke before tossing him a katana held within its scabbard. He caught the new weapon in his hands and pulled it out slightly, admiring the sharpness of the blade, and noticed that the katana was all black except for a rose-pink design running along the blade. The katana was left to me by a very dear friend and my old swordsmaster. I think she would have loved you to have it. Yugao spoke in a gentle tone, earning a nod of appreciation from her new student who looked the blade up and down with a gleeful expression. Now then, Naruto-kun, may I ask that you bring out one of your summons? I wish to see how those cards work. Yugao requested out of simple curiosity, eager to see how it works. There's not really that much to it. I just pick a card, channel chakra into it, and bam. I summon a servant, like Lancer here. The whiskered teen spoke and then jabbed a thumb in Artoria's direction, making her nod at his simple yet accurate explanation. I see. It seems that Lancer-san uses weapons. That is good, for I will teach you the fine art of kenjutsu, the art of swordplay. Yugao spoke proudly as she unsheathed her weapon, although Naruto couldn't help but gulp slightly since he knew he would be cruising for a bruising. At his hip, a single card glowed a dull purple color. Growing curious, the blonde pulled out the card and was met by Minamoto no Reiko. Berserker, I think she wants to join in. Naruto spoke up and then channeled chakra into the card. A flash of purple light appeared and the boy then found his face pressed into an exceptionally large bust compressed in a skin-tight purple bodysuit. Oh hail master, thank you so much for summoning me, spoke the new servant in a gentle tone as she embraced her new master against her warm flesh. Artoria blinked a few times at the sudden contact, a slight blush forming on her cheeks at the display, while Yugao seemed fascinated by the technique and at how precise it was. No hand signs required. Just pull out the needed card and bam, instant summon. Simple yet effective, especially if the summons themselves were particularly powerful. Why did you wish to be summoned? Artoria asked as she glanced down at her own S. It seemed as if her master was enjoying being smushed in the newcomer's bust, seeing as how he wasn't even struggling in the new woman's grip. I couldn't help but overhear that you were doing weapons training. I was so excited that I just knew I had to join in. And master was gracious enough to have summoned me like this. The purple-haired servant responded in a cheery manner, rubbing her huge S even harder into her master's face. I believe that's enough of that. We should begin training immediately. Yugao piped in, although her eyes hidden behind her mask showed amusement at the display. After Minamoto reluctantly separated from her master, Yugao began her new student by performing numerous sets of katas to get used to swinging his blade in the appropriate directions. Occasionally the Ambu woman would randomly toss an object like a rock or a piece of bark to test the boy's reflexes, resulting in some bruising since he wasn't expecting them. But soon he kept a close watch on his sensei, checking to see if she had any possible projectiles in her hands. Minamoto and Artoria would sometimes offer some advice, like minding his stance for instance. As their training progressed, the blonde couldn't help but notice that it came surprisingly easy for him. Then again, running from Chunin after a pranking spree could definitely help in stamina training. On the other hand, this was only the first day, and it was likely that Nico's training would intensify over time. After finishing his katas, Yugao began instructing him in chakra control exercises, making him run up and down a certain distance on the nearby trees to get used to clinging to other surfaces. It took him a few tries to find his balance in maintaining the needed chakra, but he soon got used to it rather quickly, but still far from fully mastering the exercise. After a while, Yugao clapped her hands and spoke, "That's enough training for today. We'll pick things up first thing tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you right here, and I won't be taking it easy on you for very long." Her promise made the boy shudder a bit since his prediction from earlier was definitely going to come true. but he nodded and decided it would be a good idea to head home for the day. Days later, it had been a few days since Naruto's training began under the tutelage of Yugao Yuzuki, and thus far, he was greatly enjoying himself. Much of his loneliness had been relieved thanks to the presence of both Artoria and Minamoto, the latter of which taking on an almost motherly role as she took it upon herself to prepare his meals. And both women seemed to like cuddling with him at night as they slept together. Day by day, even after a short period of training, he could tell he was starting to toughen up and get stronger, and his katana swings were starting to feel a lot smoother and progressively more natural to him. It almost felt like he was born for the usage of kenjutsu. Currently, the boy is sitting at his own dinner table while eating breakfast. "Come on, master," Seiya, the Minamoto cooed as she personally fed the boy herself, as though he were a small child. The whiskered teen obeying as he opened his mouth and took a bite of the offered food, a happy expression on his face as he slowly chewed to savor the rich flavor. "Honestly, Berserker, you spoil him too much," Artoria spoke in disapproval, giving a small glare to the new housemate. While she hadn't been in Naruto's service for a long time, she felt that the purple-haired Berserker was getting a little too intimate with the boy. "Nonsense, master enjoys it. And please, just call me Mina-chan. There's no Holy Grail war going on, and we all serve master. We can be friends, yes," Minamoto replied in a tone filled with warmth and kindness that belied her status as a berserker. The King of Knights remained silent for a few moments, although she had to admit that the newcomer had a point. Artoria still didn't feel comfortable with sharing her true name. "Perhaps, but I still don't like that you're being so frivolous with your true name." The berserker ignored her in favor of continuing to feed her master, not really caring for the Lancer's opinion. It was at this point that a knocking sound was heard at the front door. Artoria sipped some tea and then got up to answer it. Upon opening it, she found Yugao to be standing there still in full Ambu uniform. "The Hokage has summoned me and Naruto-kun. We need to leave as soon as possible." The Ambu spoke in a business-like tone. Nodding in understanding, the King of Knights called to her master that his teacher had arrived. Fortunately, breakfast was already over now as both master and servant approached towards the front door. "What's up, sensei?" Naruto asked with a smile, the Ambu appreciating his apparent enthusiasm. "Sandaime-sama has requested our presence. It seems our assistance is required for a certain mission," Yugao announced, prompting her student to nod in understanding. Yes, it was time to see the old man and find out what kind of mayhem he'd be getting into now. On the upside, he had a reliable army at his disposal, and he had an Ambu captain for a sensei, so he was confident he could handle anything thrown his way. Now he just needed a moment alone to study those jutsu he had copied from the Forbidden Scroll earlier. He was pretty sure that Shadow Clone Jutsu could be useful for scouting and recon purposes since the instructions mentioned that the memories of the clones transferred to the caster. Yet another thing on his mind was the Gates of Babylon that his ancestor had briefly mentioned before his disappearance. Naruto knew it was some kind of special power that Gilgamesh passed on to him, but how was he supposed to activate it? It's not like he was given any instructions. "Master, be careful, I sense something foul," Artoria mentioned, breaking her master out of his stupor as she prepared her lance. It seemed like they had already arrived much more swiftly than the boy had realized due to his musings since they now stood outside the mission assignment office. Even Minamoto seemed on guard as she had a hand on one of her weapons and asked to be specific. "What is this energy? It makes me want to destroy," the berserker asked in a venomous tone, though Yugao ignored them in favor of opening the door and ushering her student and his servants inside to meet with the Hokage. Once they all entered, Naruto took note of the fact that a silver-haired man wearing a face mask and a Konoha headband covering his eye was standing next to two familiar genin, Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. There was a third boy there with pale white skin who was giving off a forced smile of friendliness that was obviously fake, though Naruto didn't sense any bad intentions from him. "Oh, him again." Artoria sighed in irritation upon seeing Sasuke again and lowered her lance. Meanwhile, Minamoto quirked up an eyebrow, her lips twitching as though they couldn't decide to form a disgusted frown or annoyed smirk, still feeling a need to destroy the strange F-haired boy. The atmosphere seemed tense until Hiruzen cleared his throat and spoke up. "Nico, Naruto, I called you here because I am going to be assigning a joint team mission for you with Team 7. A C-rank mission to be exact." The Sandaime cringed a bit as Naruto looked at him as though he had committed some kind of betrayal and then continued to speak. "Kakashi believes his team is ready for a C rank, though I have my doubts. So is it compromise? I want you and your sensei to aid them in their mission." Gigi, really? You know that me and Sasuke almost literally can't work together seeing as how we hate each other's guts," Naruto complained in an almost childish manner, causing his Ambu teacher to lightly smack him on the head. "Grow up, Naruto. There will sometimes come a day where you will need to work with those you do not like. You don't need to be friends or anything. Just agree to get the job done and be finished with it." Yugao scolded her student a bit, earning a somewhat ashamed look from him and a quiet "Hi, sensei. Thank you for disciplining your student Nico-san. Though, who on earth are these two women with you? They definitely aren't ninjas," Kakashi asked as he looked up from his little orange book, his lone eye scanning Minamoto's form up and down since that bodysuit left little to the imagination. "Yeah, I've seen the blonde one before. I don't recognize the walking arsenal with purple hair though." The dope also has some kind of cards on him that he wouldn't show me. Sasuke piped in, glaring at his former punching bag from the academy. Naruto looked between the Hokage and Nico, asking in a silent manner if he should tell Team 7 about his summons. The two immediately sensed the unspoken question and both gave a subtle nod, telling him that it'd be okay to tell. Don't worry about them. They're my summons. The cards I have are part of my summoning technique for them. The blonde one is Lancer, though she wants her real name to be private. The purple-haired one is Berserker, or Minamoto no Reiku. Naruto answered, satisfying at least some of Kakashi's curiosity, while Sasuke had an almost disgusted look on his face. HN, so you decided to summon a pair of women. What an idiot, the Uchiha muttered in annoyance, earning some glares from both of the servants. What does the fact that we are women have to do with anything? Minamoto asked as she gripped her katana with one hand and her axe in the other, feeling very much insulted that she was being judged based on her sex. Do you even need to ask? Sasuke replied back with a sneer, looking at the servants and even Nico as though they were insects. In the background, Kakashi seemed almost like he wanted to jump out the window as he shoved his face deeper into his book, while Sakura's face seemed to be turning slightly green, and the new boy. Sai was it? He still had that fake smile. Wow, Sasuke, really? I always knew you were in a hole, but assesses too. That's just wrong. Then again, guess it comes as no surprise since cute girls almost throw themselves at you daily and you don't even give them a decent hello. Naruto spit back at the Uchiha, his body taking a stance that seemed ready to pounce and punch the self-proclaimed Avenger right in the face, but was stopped when his sensei Yugao stepped in front of him as she faced towards Kakashi. Haddock-san, I suggest you get control of Sasuke as soon as possible and instill some discipline into him. If you can't control your own genin, then I shall happily do it for you in my own way. Nico warned the copy ninja, earning a meek nod of understanding from him. Satisfied, Nico turned back to her student and spoke, Naruto-kun, I expect you to maintain some civility as well. If you attack Sasuke without just cause, I will need to punish you. If he attacks you, then don't hesitate to break a limb or two. At her words, the blonde happily nodded as he rubbed his hands sadistically as a mental image of breaking the Uchiha's limbs or jabbing his eyes out came to mind. Hers and cleared his throat and announced, now that's enough of that. Nico, Kakashi, as teachers, it is ultimately your responsibility to ensure that the peace is kept among your students and to teach them to put aside petty grievances. With that said, your mission will be to escort a Mr. Tazuna back to Wave Country and to protect him until he has finished building his bridge. Now then, here is your client now. The Sandaime gestured towards some chunin to bring in the aforementioned client, who entered the room with a bottle of booze in hand. The liquor causing the client's cheeks to be dusted with a pink color, and from his body language it was obvious that he was feeling a little tipsy. What's this? So this'll be my protection, eh? Gotta say, there's definitely some lookers here. The man called Tazuna spoke as he openly leered at Minamoto's form. Master, why do the men around here keep staring at me? Their looks of lust are starting to vex me. The berserker asked with a twitching eyebrow, clearly annoyed by all the looks she kept receiving. Even now, some of the chunin in the room were staring at her. Might have something to do with thickness. Naruto commented with a grin, slipping in a small joke about her bountiful assets. Thickness? I don't understand. Have I been putting on weight or something? Do servants even gain weight? The purple-haired berserker muttered to herself as she adopted a thinking pose, which caused her large bust to push out more. Hers and sweat dropped for a brief moment and decided to hurry things along by stating everyone head home to pack up. You may be staying in Wave for 2 to 3 weeks, so pack accordingly. You're dismissed. After that, both Yugao and Kakashi agreed that both teams would meet up at the village gates in an hour. With that done, everyone left to prepare themselves. An hour later, Sakura, are you sure you can carry all that? Naruto asked with a large sweat drop on his head as he saw the Pinkette had packed an enormous backpack filled to the brim with items, mostly clothing by the looks of it, so much so that the poor backpack seemed ready to explode at the seams while Sakura dragged it behind her with a large amount of effort. Kakashi, have you made any effort in stamping out Sakura's fangirl habits? Nico asked with a sharp edge to her voice. Even from behind her mask it was easy to see that her eyes were glaring daggers into the masked Jonin as he rubbed his head sheepishly. Now Yugao couldn't help but feel sorry for Team 7 in some ways for having such a half-assed teacher. While Kakashi was a competent Jonin, his teaching abilities are highly questionable. In the background, Sasuke scoffed as he had his hands in his pockets, obviously uncaring, while Sai seemed slightly amused. The latter for some reason was very hard to read, and he was also rather quiet since he hadn't actually said anything yet. Creepy. If we don't do something about Sakura's luggage, we may never reach Wave. Naruto commented, earning nods from all the others, though Sakura flipped him the bird in response. Artoria sighed as she approached the Pinkette and spoke, give it here. For the sake of everyone's convenience, I'll carry it. The King of Night slipped the straps off of the Pinkette's petite frame and then with one hand, slung it over her shoulder with ease, earning a wide-eyed look from Sakura and some thankful nods from everyone else. Even Sasuke breathed a sigh of relief. With that problem solved, they then began their journey towards Wave Country. The walk on the open road was a relatively quiet affair to say the least. Kakashi spent all of his time enraptured by his little orange book. Yugao sometimes asked their client some questions. Sakura was thankfully rather quiet as she occasionally stole glances of the Uchiha, said Uchiha, ignoring her in favor of staring at the deck of cards that Naruto was scanning through again. Artoria stood between her master and the Uchiha, since it was obvious from the boy's eyes that he desired Naruto's power. Minamoto was humming a happy tune to herself as she walked alongside her master. As for Sai, he was drawing something in a sketchbook and still hadn't spoken yet. Either he was mute, or he was just watching. Creepy. Though Naruto could sense that Sai person wasn't a bad guy, it seemed more like he was empty inside, though he wasn't sure why. As they continued on their way, Naruto felt a sense of danger and looked up from the deck of heroes, noticing a puddle on the side of the road. Seemed suspicious since it hadn't rained recently and there was no visible water source either. HMing to himself, the whiskered teen placed the deck of heroes into its container on his hip and slowly reached for the katana his sensei had given him. The boy felt a hand gently squeeze his shoulder and gently urged him forward with a small push. He then heard the voice of his teacher say, "Keep walking. Don't draw undue attention." Naruto nodded since Yugao unsurprisingly caught on to the potential danger as well, and likely Kakashi as well given their rather extensive careers as ninja. The whiskered teen took a moment to relax himself, putting his trust in his master's judgment, but he kept his hand on his katana regardless. His base instincts proved correct as two figures appeared from the fake puddle and cut Kakashi to pieces using a bladed chain. The duo charged towards Tezuna's direction as Yugao, Naruto, Sasuke and even Sai leapt out in front preparing to intercept the attackers. However, the two rogue nin were jerked back since someone had grabbed the chain connecting them. It was Minamoto, who was sporting a chilling smile that could freeze hell over. "Me oh my, such naughty children. I suppose I now have to punish you. Now, accept your punishment." Minamoto spoke as she licked her lips in a cruel manner. Soon, the screams of the demon brothers were heard, followed by the cracking and snapping of bones. It was at this point that Kakashi appeared completely unharmed, having used a substitution to save himself from the demon brothers' telegraphed attack. "Are human limbs supposed to bend like that?" Tezuna asked in horror as the berserker continued to punish the rogue nin. "They aren't. Wow, I've never seen a man's pelvis shoved into his chest area." Yugao commented as she took out a notebook and started to scribble something down. How did you guys know they were going to attack anyway?" Sakura asked with a confused expression, and then cringed when a loud crunching noise was heard as Minamoto began pushing things into questionable places. The puddle on the side of the road, common camouflage genjutsu in aim or kiri where there's lots of water, rain or moisture. Pretty worthless elsewhere, especially since it hadn't rained in some time. Yugao answered while the brothers began pleading for a mercy killing. "No crying now. Accept your punishment with some dignity." The berserker servant cooed with a serene smile and then began to poke some holes in places. After a while, both Mizu and Gazu finally croaked, mercifully passing away and thus freeing them from the unholy tortures that befell them. With the grisly scene finally ending, both shinobi teachers turned to Tezuna with Kakashi asking, "All right then, Mr. Bridge Builder. I think you owe us an explanation for why these ninja attacked. You aren't hiding anything, are you? Or does Minamoto-san need to punish you too?" While Kakashi had no authority over Minamoto, the threat should be able to easily scare a civilian that just witnessed said servant punish a pair of rogue nin without any sign of guilt or remorse. The client quickly glanced over towards the berserker who was still giving that chilling smile, the threat quickly making him crack as he spilled the beans, informing the ninja of the whole story, about how a man named Gato had essentially taken over Wave Country and that the only viable way to save the nation is to finish his bridge which would connect to the mainland, thus breaking Gato's monopoly. They all listened to his story, feeling sympathetic to his plight. While he shouldn't have deceived them for giving false mission parameters, he was still a desperate man trying to save his home and people. "I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I think we should continue on. We have an Ambu captain and a rank borderline S-rank Jonin with us. I have all my servants and the deck of heroes with me, so I think we should be good to go." Naruto piped in, not wanting to leave Tezuna out here to die and remain helpless. "I agree with Naruto's assessment. Any objections?" Nico asked in a stern tone, though it didn't seem like anyone was willing to back out. Even Sakura nodded with some confidence. Meanwhile, Artoria felt a sense of pride in her master, since as a knight, she couldn't leave people who were helpless in the hands of a tyrant. Meanwhile, Minamoto seemed to have a far-off look in her eyes, like her mind was someplace else even as she nodded as well. "Well now, it seems someone has some S after all." Sai finally spoke for the first time, earning a shocked look from Naruto. "Holy shit, he talked," the whiskered teen shouted as he pointed towards the pale boy with a shaky finger who had a genuinely confused expression. "Yes, I talked. Sorry for my silence. But I was once told that if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything at all," Sai replied as he sported a fake smile yet again. All the while, the other genin of Team 7 thought so that's why he didn't talk much, since they had surprisingly little interaction with the mysterious Sai. Afterwards, with the matter settled on continuing the mission, they continued the long march to Wave Country. However, unknown to Naruto, he would soon learn more about what it means to be a ninja in the not-so-distant future. End Chapter 2. Amake, The Many Deaths of Emiyashiro. Nice day today, Shiro muttered as he headed home. For some reason, he had a strange dream about being killed by boiling hot cheese. But when he woke up in his bed he was fine, but still smelled of cheese, so he had to take a shower. With a chuckle he pulled out a bag of peanuts and began to munch on a few as he took a shortcut through a local park. As he walked, he saw a chipmunk come running up to him, making him stop as he wondered why the tiny creature would approach a human. The chipmunk stood on its back legs and stretched out its front paws, making him realize that it was begging for food. Yes, park-goers would sometimes drop pieces of food around for the animals. Well, 1 or 2 peanuts won't hurt, he muttered to himself and tossed a few peanuts to the ground. The chipmunk quickly snatched them up and stuffed them into its cheeks before it resumed begging again. With a chuckle he reached into the bag again, and when he pulled his hand out, he found himself surrounded by squirrels and chipmunks, all of them looking up at him and staring at the bag full of peanuts. Feeling uncomfortable, Shiro tried to gently step his way out of the encirclement, only for one of the critters to make a squawk sound, and then they all leapt up on him, sinking their teeth into his flesh and ripping apart his skin with their claws to make him drop the bag of nuts. He threw the bag in a random direction, causing the critters to chase after it. Shiro ran in the opposite direction and then fell face first into a large pond that was knee-deep. However, nearby there was a nest of swan eggs resting a few feet away. Naturally, the parents saw him as an intruder and began angrily honking as they relentlessly attacked him to protect their eggs. Shiro couldn't fight off the swans, and each time he tried to lift himself up to gasp for air, the swan parents' attack would push him back into the water until at last he finally drowned. And so came another bad end for Emi Shiro for the audience's amusement.